What up? What up? What up? What up? What up? What up? What it do? Sometimes we gotta just have a short conversation for a moment and look at some things and say to ourselves, at what point do we start to look at history and take from history what we need to change to better the future of the people of the world? When we look back at the establishing of corporate America, you got to remember when that first set of Caucasians came over here, they came over here under false pretense anyway. But the one thing that's not mentioned in all of it is the first set of Europeans that came over were melanated Europeans escaping the Spanish Inquisition who married in to the indigenous nations of this land. Algonquin, Yamasee, Iroquois, Powhatan, the like, right? Now, let's take a look at the Revolutionary War. When we establish a break from English so-called tyranny and taxation, we were helping the dregs that was kicked out of England. Because those first set of Caucasians that came over, what they're not telling you, were the first indentured servants. They came here in servitude to work for their transport here. From dignitaries who took over and established themselves in a melanated history in Europe. They were the dregs of society, the prostitutes, the drunkards laying in the street, the bums. When we help them get established here and then help them come out from under that new English rule when they first wrote their Declaration of Independence, it had nothing to do with the indigenous nations here. They already had their own established confederacies, their own flags, all that. They were already established along with certain melanated Europeans, French, Spanish, the other one, Spain, because the Moors of Spain came first. What they're not telling you is that Napoleon Bonaparte is of that melanated, Columbus is of the melanated. They whitewashed a lot of history. The Revolutionary War, we had the dregs of London gain freedom from taxation of England. In turn, what they did then was took the indigenous people to war, the Civil War. That Confederate flag is still one of our indigenous flags. Jefferson Davis is melanated. Andrew Johnson, melanated. Polk, melanated. Zachary Taylor, melanated. They whitewashed a lot of history. When you go back and check that true Confederate Army, it was melanated. The Civil War had nothing to do with slavery. It had to do with them trying to double tax those melanated brothers for their land and crops. This is where the double cross then in turn came in again, where you get the Christian cross from, the double cross. This is where that double cross comes into play. Those treaties back then were never honored that they made with the indigenous people. We have our own confederacies. You have to go back and recheck the history for the truth. That is the reason they assassinated Johnny Cochran, because he knew what he was coming for when he talked about what was owed per se in reparations. It was the return of stolen properties that they are living off of, which they assumed certain indigenous names and properties. He was coming back for that, just as well as they robbed the Freedom Bank, the Freedmen's Bank, and it disappeared. Where did that gold go? There are a lot of towns that are under lakes because of the same reason. And until we go back before the United Nations and establish our true confederacies, we're going to be the bastard nation of the world. You know, the thing that I don't understand is like those melanated politicians, they know the truth. And yet they won't stand up for what they know truly belongs to them. Those that work in law, judges, lawyers, district attorneys, Melanated, they know. Yet they refuse to stand up and be accounted for. Those of you who work civil servant jobs, who don't even care to know that your family was one of those that was robbed of their properties. Look to just do your own foul and dirty, not knowing you're complicit in our downfall, not knowing you are complicit in our downfall. It is when are you, my fellow Niji brothers and sisters, are going to say to yourselves, we have to stand as one. Because if you go back and really pay attention to those religious books, Caucasians are never mentioned in that history. So everybody who spoke about is my cousins. What don't you see there? But yet you still argue and fight and tear each other down. Wake up, people. Wake up. Stop being the table that they sit their Monopoly game on and play on your back. Stand up. Let that game fall to the floor. Recognize yourself for who you are. Just something to think about. It is truly something we need to get together and honestly have a conversation about. Peace.